Okay, we're going to transition into our wrap-up time and move right along with that, and then we'll have a break at the end. If you really need to break, then feel free, but we're going to try to use your time as well as we can this morning. The last session was to talk about what have you done that was successful, what are you proud of, what plans do you have for the future, and we're going to start with that as our first question. Eric Mathis is going to take notes for us for this session and keep up with that. But what are some things that you've done that were successful, what are you proud of, and maybe the chief thing there is what are your plans for the future? Let's start out with that question. We have talked about some of that along the way, and we've been quite free about what we plan and what we're doing, but what are some things that you haven't mentioned that ought to be mentioned to this group that would be helpful for us as a whole?
Well, one of the things that we have done that in terms of success, how do you define success? Part of it is I have students populating my classroom, and then the other one was, I used the phrase last night, place at the table. I discovered we had worship leaders, self-proclaimed worship leaders walking all over the campus, but they were not music majors. I had no access to them. I had no way to get them into my classroom. So we created a minor in worship arts about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's music light. It's not a music minor at all. It's my core classes with a little bit of music knowledge, a little bit of applied, a little bit of ensemble thrown in there, and if they're not ministry majors, then they take an extra theology class to make it a little bit larger. That has been a huge success. All of my classes, almost all of my classes, will be 3/4 to 4/5 filled with the worship arts minors. Now, it has changed the dynamic, the way a few of the classes are taught. It has changed some rhythm. We had to change sequencing because and they're hard to keep up with because they're like smoke in the wind. You know, they take a class and you think they're in the minor, and then they disappear. Then they show up. Someone shows up. Well, who are you? Oh, you're working on the minor? I didn't know. That's kind of crazy. Is it perfect? No. Does it do everything we want? No. The next step for us is we're in discussions right now of doing something that is a step between being a music major and doing the minor, but it's not housed in our College of Fine Arts. We're actually looking at that option. We don't know if we'll go there, but we're looking at it, and there's more openness to that idea than we've ever had before on campus. Simply because what we'll wind up doing is tying on to a wave of growth and energy that is in another place on campus, and in our School of Theology, it's College of Theology. We don't know if we're going to actually wind up there, but it's possible.
Lee, will you be the program director for that under the SACS heading?
Probably what would happen is interesting, and I did not bring this up. This is not my I wasn't even going to talk about this, but here we go. The position may change. I may become duly appointed in 2 colleges on campus, which is not unheard of. That way we don't lose total control of it, and that has been a fear. You know, we want to maintain our turf. And because I did the minor a few years ago, when I did that, we did it with the ministry people in mind. And say, hey, look, you got people over here, and they have this thing, this interdisciplinary degree, which they combine 3 minors. And that stuck our minor in play, and then at least half the minors are doing this interdisciplinary thing. And because I brought the theology faculty in on the minor and asked for their opinion, which is where that extra theology thing came from, they're more open to talking with me now. And a lot of the same people are still there, different dean, different philosophy, but it's a lot of the same faculty. And when I walk in, sit down at their meetings, it's going to be like, well, hey, you know, you're kind of part of us, so what do you want to talk about? So that's been a great success for us.
We've done some similar things with regard to populating our classes with other majors by creating 2 different scenarios. One would be the regular church music course, where everybody enrolls in that, but I would create then a separate lab for the music majors, so that whatever watering down has to take place for the non-musicians, I can still get the music majors in the class where they need to be, meet all the NASM standards, give them the education they need, the experience they need without that. I got to have them separately, an extra type of English. That creates some load issues, but it's minimal compared to what I would have to be doing if I was in the other.
I try to make the minors suffer.
And another issue is, or another way of approaching it is I will create a special topics class that's similar to the sacred music class, and they meet simultaneously. So actually I have students enrolled in 2 different classes, meeting simultaneously. They have different syllabi and different assessment standards, but the content that's presented is the same to both groups. And that's been very successful as well.
So who's taking the special topics?
The special topics would be non-music majors.
Non-music.
It would be those other, because that way I don't, it gives me a mechanism, an administrative mechanism by which I could assess them differently and create different reading assignments and things like that, and it's a little cleaner. But they're all meeting in the same place at the same time, so it makes my provost happy about load issues.
Right. Other ideas, best practices, plans for the future? Yes?
I found this very helpful because the next 2 weeks we're reviewing our church music worship track in our BA program. Some of the ideas you had, Eric, but just the general discussions about right now our program isn't so interdisciplinary. It probably needs to be. So I've appreciated a lot the comments and going home with sort of an extra free bag on Delta full of ideas.
Thank you.
One of the things that I'm concerned about for my students is a lot of them do get worship leading experience during the time they're there, but the only worship leading experience they're required is one small project in the class and their internship. And so because of that, I've started thinking, we're very heavy on performance in our church music degree. Our church music degree requires more applied than any of our other degrees. And so I've begun to think, how can we take just a little bit of that and get them some required worship leading experience? And so I began to think about and plan, and we are creating next semester for the first time a course called Worship Lab, which would give them, they would be required to participate 2 semesters out of their 8 that are there, but would give them opportunity to connect with other students to create small worship teams that would then be involved in our chapel or the Thursday night worship that I talked about, or the many D-Nows and events like that that we are asked to provide musicians for. But as we began to talk about it, I had students come to me and say, I'm not a church music major, but I'd like to do that. And I don't really have time in my schedule. Well, I want some control. I want something that says, if I commit to this, I'm going to be there every time. So we're working on making it something that can be taken for credit or for no credit, and that will be open to music majors and non-majors alike. One reason that I really decided this needed to happen for the non-majors is the 3rd time I walked into our practice room areas one night and found every piano major practice room, which they tend to be a little bit larger, filled with 6 or 8 students with djembes and guitars trying to practice praise music in them. So basically what Worship Lab is going to do is give a little bit of guided input, but provide rehearsal space and connect them with opportunities to lead worship. I'm excited about trying it. I'm not sure how it's going to work, but we're going to see. And I'm sure some of you probably have something like this, and if you do, I would like to hear some input from you, either in this time or face-to-face, so that I can kind of get some ideas from you.
We're starting that as well, but what I'm also going to do is once a week they'll all meet together to discuss kind of some best practices and things, and I'm going to be covering a lot of the things that are traditionally covered in church music administration, and that course really comes out of NASM guidelines. We're trying to address that specifically, but to me it seems like a stronger teaching method to teach administration as you're doing it, as opposed to let's talk about how you administrate and then later on you can administrate in your internship. So the reason I mention that is that there's a little bit of curricular room that I've created, because I'm going to phase out the standalone course of church music administration, and even non-majors, those types of things are things that they're interested in. It's not just only if you're going to be a full-time. So just a little tip of how I am structuring it.
we're going to experiment, I don't know how it'll work, but a new course in our curriculum is called Worship Design, and there's a Worship Design lab component to it. And so the course essentially functions as theory course, and on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the students will meet for an hour and 5, an hour and 10 minutes. And then there's a lab component either at night for 2 hours, we're not sure yet, we're looking at a Tuesday night for a 2-hour time period, or a Tuesday and Thursday for an hour each. In the lab, that's where they'll all do practice, rehearse, and kind of really projects for preparing worship that they'll end up needing. We'll see how it works.
Great. Other ideas and things that you're doing that are new? And
Randall,
yes, sir.
I'm fortunate enough to teach at a university where the music division in the School of Fine Arts enjoys a very good relationship with the School of Christian Studies faculty. And 2 or 3 things have come out of that recently, one of which is that I'm now a part of the Christian Studies faculty as well as being on the music faculty. And that's been a boon for the whole, for everything we do in regard to the things we've been talking about here. We have also added 2 new majors. They're both Christian Studies majors, one of which is a worship ministry degree that is a Christian Studies major with a music minor. But then we also have the primary courses out of the church music worship arts curriculum bundled as a worship emphasis in that major. And then 3 years ago, we added a church media production arts major, which is a Christian Studies major that has some visual arts courses, theater arts, and mass communications courses built into the major as well. So those are some things that we've been able to do
I think
in the
one
last
of the
3 years.
Ron, what I hear you saying and a bunch of the rest of us, and we've done a good bit of here, is taking what courses we already have and packaging them differently and bundling them into other things. We now have a worship emphasis here at Truett that is basically putting together some courses we already have from several different other programs and packaging those a bit differently. But I think the more of that we can do, as I'm reflecting on our meeting 4 years ago, we didn't have any of these things going on in our schools, and now there's a lot of that kind of more innovative approaches that there's all around the table in terms of minors and emphases and all kinds of hybrids, and I think that's really where we're going in the future. A couple of things I want to mention that we're doing. David alluded yesterday to the doctoral program that we have going. We are not able to officially announce anything there, but if all goes well in the next month, the 1st of November, November 3rd, we hopefully you will have some good news coming from us in terms of having a PhD and a DMA in church music. So we'll have a dual track that either of those can be done here. Hopefully, and again, this is all just between us in this room, if all of that goes well, then we will be doing a search for our 3rd faculty member. So we will be looking again for someone else. So those are 2 really positive things that are going on with us. And I have permission to share those with you, but they're certainly not for any kind of broad consumption, because it's not the kind of thing we want to get out to our regents prior to their actual. So not the best practice right there. That would be bad for our community scholars that have gathered with it. Yeah. So I'm simply sharing that because we are all very connected, and we know people for whom these kinds of things would be important. So we want to
translate it. I'll kill you dead if you do it.
Make sure nobody's pointing their iPhone at you.
We will all just go on the blacklist. Yeah, other innovations.
We've had something that's been really exciting happen at Liberty that is 27 days old. I mentioned in my presentation yesterday that we had 2 different departments of music. And back in 2002, maybe in 2003, they separated the Department of Music from the department, what became the Department of Music and Worship Studies. And I came to interview for the job in 2005 at the Department of Music and Worship, thinking that was the Department of Music. We kind of got there and found out that they had this church split going on. And that's a nice way to say it. So the contention between and pressure and stress between the two departments, at times could be less than ideal. Well, the administration announced on the 1st of September that they were going to combine the two departments and form a Center for Music and Performing Arts, and Brother John Kinchin over there is the new associate dean for that. And then we would continue to have the Department of Music Worship Studies, which actually is now under a kind of revamped Center for Music and Worship Studies. And it's all under a big umbrella called the Liberty University School of Music. So we really feel like it's a great step forward for schools and the university. It certainly makes a major statement to the Academy of Art that we can get along with each other and that we're all unified in our mission at the university to train musicians as champions for Christ. So certainly pray for us as we move forward in this. It's a big task. LaVon Grace, we know LaVon Grace from First Baptist Church in Jackson, Mississippi, was named the new associate dean for the Center for Music and Worship. And we'll throw that in the report as well.
Excellent. Okay, other innovations? Yes?
Let me ask a question. My home church takes all the public domain hymns, and they work through a company that does this, but they project 4-part harmony. The college does not. Anytime you use the screen, it's lyrics only, which I think contributes to musical illiteracy on a massive scale. Do any of you have any experience with that on your campus or even at your churches?
Yeah, I've done that. We've not as a company. We've done it mostly in house we use the GIMP instead of Photoshop for manipulating images, and so you can take very easily all of the images now they're on henry.org and modify those to your heart's content. If your screen is the right shape and your projector works this way, you can just project the hymnal-shaped image onto whatever, but it poses a difficulty for us usually because the screens are oblong, not portrait-oriented. But beyond that, it usually takes me 15 minutes to manipulate an image so that it'll fit onto a projection screen. And when I've done that, it's been received well.
I mean, I think unison singing is great, but let's face it, many of us also sing because we sing in parts, and in certain church traditions, that's the only way to sing. I mean, go listen to a melody or whatever. It's again, the hymn book might not last, but I would hope that at least 4-part harmony for the traditional pieces would still be available technologically. We actually print mousy foam of the copyright things. But there you cannot do parts.
Excellent. As we look on toward some particular evaluations of the time we spent together here, what are some takeaways from this event that you will implement into your context? So as you take just a moment to reflect on what we talked about in this 2 days packed into a day and a half or whatever we would say, but as you look at that, what are, I would say 3 to 5 takeaways, but let's share 3 to 5. So what's your top one? What's something that you will take away from here that you will implement?
I can't say that I'll implement it yet, but I've been listening to the ideas about how to integrate or repackage things, because I think there's a mutiny on the horizon at my school about not having church music. I think that could be in our future. We had a change in leadership, and that's a faculty members are saying we need it. And so just listening, getting this is really good, particularly the lab ideas.
Thank you, Mayor.
Well, we've been looking at beginning the minor, and so I've really enjoyed hearing the comments from those who have already begun that or in the process of it. But that's something that's on the horizon for us is the minor and worship music, and we're looking at tying it into our seminary philosophy as well.
One of the ideas that I intended to do when we started this conference was to ask one of you to be responsible for compiling basically curricular ideas and minors and all these kinds of things in some form for us. And then I just never asked anybody to do it, and we never got that project going. But I think, you know, we can find all those things online, but we talked about this the last time we were together, some kind of neutral place where we could all have that. That's a little bit of a different thing, but it feeds into, you know, the curiosity of what's in your minor and all that kind of things, you know.
Can I comment on that just from a recent student perspective? Because Truett did do that, and I just think it's really difficult when you're talking about in the classroom what you do about combining majors and minors that was different or whatever, what we call it at Truett. But in the classroom, which I loved Baylor, I loved the classroom, but I thought it was really difficult as a student to not be held back. And especially in class discussion, I don't know how to, you know, properly navigate that in the classroom when you have, you know, someone who, just different levels of expectations in the classroom and what you want to get out of the that was really difficult at times to navigate. Partly probably because it was new and, you know, we just started it, I guess, last year. But just from a student perspective, there was some tension that, you know, probably critically needs to be addressed as far as combining, you know, majors and minors or whatever.
Which, I agree with that. We've experienced that, which is exactly why we created that lab component where we could get those majors alone to delve deeper.
Yeah. Other takeaways, other things that you think that you could implement into your context.
I'm somewhat heartened and encouraged by what I'm hearing from different colleagues here about the interdisciplinary approach, the blending of tracks, something like that, because I do feel that's something that our students are coming to us saying they want, and we just have to find ways to figure it out. Modifying our degrees and nomenclature and all those things. I'm encouraged by that, to know that others are facing those same questions.
I think related to that, Ron, I think that I can take back to our folks that other people really are being innovative, and other people are coloring outside the lines, and other people are pushing the envelope a bit in terms of different standards and accrediting and all sorts of things, and we're all exploring all of those different options. And I think I can say, you know, we're not the only ones trying to push ahead here. Lots of people are doing this, and lots of people are being innovative. And I think in comparison to our meeting a few years back, we talked about a lot of these things, and I think we all sort of got some energy to go out and do a little bit of them, and now we're hearing it all over the room about things that we've changed. And you know, whether it came from that gathering or not, it is happening, and that's the most important thing. Other things that you think you could implement in your context?
I'm energized after Mark's presentation to do more on Facebook, connecting with current students, grads, and prospects. So thank you for that.
I would concur. I think that I'm considering actually befriending students. I've been hesitant to actually send a friend request to a student, and I think, you know, I told somebody Thursday afternoon, I told a person, I said, well, I've given my cell phone number to my students as something I've not done in the past. And this person just gasped, like, oh my gosh, you must have completely lost your mind. You know, and I'm thinking, well, you know, nobody calls me on my other phone, and they're all texting, and that's all they care about these days. And, you know, I mean, really, what difference does it make? You know, if you give it to one, they all get it anyway, so you might as well just give it. But this person thought I had completely lost my mind. So I think I might listen a little bit more, you know, and move on to some other one.
Facebook is the new email.
Yeah.
I mean,
it isn't taboo. It isn't
platform free, but it's just a different.
I think we've got to get past this. Somehow it would be stalking or inappropriate, or you know, or there would be, you know, weirdisms going on here.
It's only weird if you make it weird. You know, if you're commenting on things.
Yes.
Sometimes there's some ethical issues you can get into. Like, for instance, I saw a student one time through a news feed, shouldn't have waited until the last minute to study for this test. You know, and then that was in the back of my mind when I was grading their test, and they didn't do very well, you know, so what do you do? There's some potentially ethical things there, but I think if you're careful on what you comment or don't comment on, you can draw back, you can be well connected to people meaningful, but draw appropriate boundaries, just like you would a person.
But that student you could have overheard them saying that
That's right.
as they passed. I mean, that's the thing we've got to keep in mind. It's just a different platform. You can be stupid in person or stupid on Facebook.
But it's more stupid to put it in print.
One of the reasons I keep my door shut a lot is because there's so much that happens in the hall that not only do I not need to know, but I don't want to know. I really don't want to know these things. My wife teaches English, and invariably, about 11 o'clock the night before the essay's due, the emails start just pouring in, asking questions about the essay that is due at 8 o'clock in the morning, which says, I have yet to begin.
You know,
it's very incriminating.
One thing kind of tagging off of this that we talked about whether we use Facebook for discussion or not. Facebook has allowed me to see this whole world. I was in it when I was a student, but I just forgot that what happens between 11 o'clock at night and 2 o'clock in the morning. And there's some really robust, meaningful things that the students are doing at that time, back and forth. And Facebook gives us an option to bring that into the classroom. So, I mean, I know we kind of think about that, not that it's the night before maybe, but I mean, you know, some of those, I mean, like when they're engaged in different ways, I mean, it's been fascinating to see what kind of posts they'll put at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Moving on to another question. What do you see as some next steps for this group? How should we continue to interact and connect?
That's what I was just sitting here thinking about, because I'm still relatively new in this business, and this networking of this meeting has been so valuable. And people like Vernon and Al and John have been so helpful to me. But I'm going to need more input from people like this before 4 years from now. And I'm wondering if there's some type of ongoing interaction either between this group or other similar groups that you all may know, maybe a Facebook group or some Facebook group like that, something that, because I mean, you know, next week I will have a question that I need.
Randall will give you his cell number.
Okay.
Or they will. Just ask
So next Tuesday at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'll have a question.
Yeah.
The whole world will have my
I have it on my Facebook.
Randall?
Yes.
I think I have to leave now to catch a plane, but you just mentioned somebody compiling what everybody's doing curriculum-wise, and I have a sneaking suspicion that many of you are probably involved in this dissertation, but William DeSanto from the University of Oklahoma did a dissertation in 2005 where he polled upwards of 100 places that offered undergraduate degrees in sacred music, however they were described. And that dissertation is available through ProQuest, and does a really thorough summary of what courses were offered and their kind of popularity ratings and the content of those courses.
2005?
2005.
That's when it's published, and so the research, obviously, because you mentioned that when you
So the
all
research
mentioned
was
08,
what happened.
a lot of these things happened.
Yeah.
I think he's at
a lot of changes, but
he's at Valley Forge Christian College or something, isn't that right? I think he's there.
Yeah. In any case, that's available. The title of it is Analysis of Undergraduate Sacred Music Curriculum, Content, etc. And NASWA schools. So that's there maybe as a starting point.
Yeah.
That's correct.
other ways that we could continue to interact and connect, what do you think?
I think to echo some type of this event repeated, I mentioned it yesterday, but I'll say it again. I think this type of event repeated where we also bring maybe one or two of our brightest and best students, and there are two separate tracks. Maybe we talk. There's a track for teachers, a track for students that sometimes overlap, and there's larger plenary sessions, or maybe with practitioners as well. But then the other thing is I'd love to see all of these presentations either expanded upon and compiled into some kind of larger publication or online component or something like that. And I hate to say that because I know that's not some folks at Baylor, but someone here to do some kind of major editing project I think would be great in terms of scholarship.
We'll put that in the notes and we'll certainly see what might become something.
It occurs to me that one of the issues we all face in revising our curriculum is meeting NASM standards. And I'm wondering if a subcommittee or something like that could be formed to address that very issue with NASM as the competencies that we deem appropriate. We're the ones studying this, and they always have that one meeting there of the church music programs course is usually on Tuesday
There
morning.
is, there is an initiative being voted on.
Right.
I just saw that.
The BM and worship studies.
But they're voting on something new.
We've got it right
And hopefully you've all logged in on Commons,
Right.
I mean, part of that process.
How many of you typically go to NASM? How many of you are at that administrative level? Okay, about half of you all. No.
Both administrative and actually going.
There's also a platform on Sunday afternoon with the NESM leadership that we found very, very receptive.
Okay.
And John's actually brought a couple ideas to the table that actually passed on and became reality. And it's kind of one of the best kept secret kind of things. It's open, it's an hour, and they just are there if you have suggestions for them. It would be a great place for us to present this, I think.
So in terms of our gathering again, would you be thinking 2 years is what we originally planned to try to meet again in 2 years, and then time flew by and we didn't?
Personally, I like the idea of the interaction through online resources, Facebook or whatever, the 2-year meeting. I think the face-to-face connection to restore and make new relationships and friendships and hear it live is very helpful.
And the reality is we intend to interact through technology and then we don't. The truth is we sent out some requests for some of you, for all of you that were here before and the ones who weren't, to send us curriculum things to post and a couple other requests, and we got 2 responses out of 20, even after repeated asks. So that's not chastising anybody, because, but I know, you're like me, you're looking for how many emails and how many requests can you not respond to, rather than how many must you respond to. And when it includes attachments and finding things and whatever links, then, that's at least 30, 40-minute job, and we don't have time for lots of those things. So we intend to do, but we don't. But actually gathering, it does create a lot of new energy and important things. So
I wonder if, there's grant money that's often available in lots of different places. Certainly we've talked about Lilly, but Lilly has an option you can get funding for exploring potential projects and whatnot. And I wondered if, something that this group might want to propose would be some sort of special project related to the pedagogy of teaching music and worship. I think you can get $7,000 to $10,000 grants solely for the purpose of just meeting and planning and preparing what you might do to create a larger grant proposal. And if that's not something this group might try to take on, specifically to address the teaching and training of music and worship leaders.
I think that's an excellent idea, and I think it would be excellent for us to look into some grants, because the reality is, at least for the foreseeable future, until we get some more money through some planned giving, we have sort of, if this doctoral thing does go, then we have tied up every bit of spare change we have, and we've committed our pensions, in a sense, to our part of this doctoral proposal. So we have, this is the last time we have anything to offer.
You must have missed a meeting.
So the next time we need to gather on our own nickel. I talked about working into even older age than David, if you can imagine, in this new paradigm. So, I know that's hard to fathom.
I think the Institute, their grant program, may be the kind of.
Because we're not a church, but I think we certainly are connected enough that we could make some
The
justifications.
Institute has funded projects for organizations that deal with church music training, all the way from Roman Catholic to Evangelical Protestant.
Are there a couple of you who would be willing to work on maybe 3 of you that would be willing to kind of form a task force to look into some grant opportunities, or maybe approaching the Calvin Institute about funding our gathering in 2 years and some things like that? Okay, Ron would do that. Who else would be willing to work with Ron? Okay, Sweet Hong.
I'm there.
And Bert's there, and it never hurts to have somebody who can speak in the moment. So, okay, all right, and we have you duly noted in our notes here. No pun intended. All right, other ideas about connecting. Okay, another question. On a national or global level, what projects or emphases could we, around which we come together? So in terms of something much bigger than ourselves, and we talked a lot about bringing our students together for bigger world kind of things. What might that look like? Do you have any ideas? Is anything percolating inside you on that?
One good place to connect might be with the International Council of Ethnodoxologists. Robin Harris is the president of that group, and she is in Dallas at the Graduate Institute for Applied Linguistics. And they offer a course every year for credit. It's really a very, very fine experience. So they have some resources globally that can be very valuable to us.
What's the institute? I mean, the organization?
The International Council of Ethnodoxologists.
One of the things that we've done here the last few years is we have a donor who's given us a very significant amount of money for us to take music students in on missional experiences. And we will be in our third cycle of that this year. We've taken 18 or 20 students now that have taken music and used it cross-culturally. It occurs to me that we might be able to, at some point, invite some of your students to come into that experience. And, you know, sometimes we need some more people and we need some more folks of certain types or whatever. I mean, I guess most of the students here that have been around a while, Emily's been part of that, Jacob has several, but I think we might do some collaborative things on those levels, and which would benefit in a lot of different ways. Because again, we don't have to duplicate all things. It's important that we tried in some of the conferencing and that kind of thing that we've done is not to duplicate, but bring other people that were doing similar things together and then putting our efforts, making a bigger effort out of a bunch of individuals.
I think one of the things that Kelvin has done well is to relocate these conferences out of North America to other parts of the world. And I think if your college or your universities are open to you going overseas for training and having conferences, this is something that needs to happen. And I think that's where the collaborative aspect will help, where each different colleges or universities actually pool their resources together and set up a high caliber team. Because it's very hard to be trained outside of North America, seriously. Whether you're in Latin America or Africa, if you can have that kind of a training outpost out there on a regular basis, that means maybe an institution in Asia where you go regularly, different schools on rotation to be there. That will transform the landscape of the place.
Talk a little bit about how our team did training in Malaysia this summer.
Yeah, I think what we did with Baylor was we actually brought a team out, not just to the seminary. We connected with the local seminary there, and they were responsible to publicize our presence. And what we did was we assembled a team of students, so we had something like, how many of us that were teaching?
There were 11 students.
Yeah, there were 11 students, and we broke up into something like 7 classes, or 7 sessions altogether, and they were all packed together. And so we ran courses from songwriting to worship leading to vocal techniques, all on one Saturday afternoon. That was the first time that they ever had that kind of training from America. Yeah. It's too far away for casual visitors to just drop by and do mission tourism. You have to be deliberate in that process to be there.
Were these undergraduates as well as graduate students?
This group was all graduates except for one quite
two undergrads.
There were two undergrads, that's right, both, yeah, but mostly graduates. This was pretty tough on our students, and it was kind of trial by fire, because some of them have really never taught, but they stepped up and did some pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah. And it makes their CV look good. When you're applying for a job, that you've done a mission trip and you've actually done training. You're not just touring the place and building toilets, but you actually taught. I think that really makes them look good, and I think it's good for our institution as well to be having people there and the connection. The thing is to look at long term. Do not do a hit and run with seminaries because they are tired of hit and run missionaries. They want a long term kind of deal with you if you really want to do that. So that's the thing with Sabah, that we have connection, that now Baylor is connected with Sabah Seminary, and that will be ongoing. You don't have to do every year, but every couple of years when you're there, that's needed. I mean, that will overcome the visa problem that a lot of the rest of the world cannot get into.
I think it could also be really wonderful if we could establish some connections with different places around the world where we might go and teach for a month-long experience in the summer, or we might teach a class for a college or seminary or something like that in the summer. I've often wanted to do those things, but didn't know where those places might be, and then you have to know a couple of years ahead, so you plan your schedule. I think those are also things, personally, that I think sometimes even people in our churches would fund us to go do those things. And people that we know, there are so many people who care about what we do when we're willing to go and ask them. And they would pay for us to go offer ourselves to a place that doesn't have the money to even pay for us to travel there. And then oftentimes I think those places can provide food and lodging, some in-kind things where they could never give us a stipend or pay to have us go there. And I would love for us to be able to facilitate that, because what that does is then it changes the world for us. And then if we could come up with some common syllabi and common coursework, because again, when you think about teaching cross-culturally, how do you do that without importing a Western approach that might actually be not helpful at all? And how do you do that well?
I've done something like that for the last several years in Southeast Asia. And in Singapore, I taught a 2-week intensive course on worship and its surrounding culture. And the way we approached that, I went into the New Testament, Paul's writings about Christianity against those cultures, and we just looked at that. And then I talked about Christianity against American, Western culture, and then I just shut up. And I just backed up. Now you teach me about Christianity against your culture. And it was magnificent. I mean, that third part was magnificent. They not only were teaching me, but they started talking to each other. And it was a question I asked the other day about the Fruitcake Festival. So they got into discussions with each other, should or shouldn't be doing it. Can you sing Christian lyrics to Buddhist chants? And should we take part in the Dragon Festival? Those kinds of things. So there, I think we were able to go to Scripture first. I could share from my experience, and backed off, and they were encouraged to share from their experience. And it was, I think, very successful teaching. And that syllabus is available if anybody's interested.
And we do have Terry, who's done a good bit of this. Sui Long has taught all over the world and is incredibly generous with materials and resources. Also at Fuller, Africa.
Roberta King.
Yeah, Roberta King. I've learned a lot by talking with her through the years and asking her, now, what did you teach in Kenya when you were approaching this, and how did you do that, and how did you interact, and how were you not the power person, and all those kind of things. So those kinds of folks, resources among us can help us a lot.
The other thing you need to also know is that they have a different academic calendar. So when you're in summer, you're in full swing. So which is ideal for you. I mean, they can actually tag you. They can't fly you in, but if you're there, they will feed you till you drop. That's their culture. So you just only have to get your airfare there. That's all. Then they'll pick you up from the airport and they'll post and wind you up.
A couple of other things. What has been particularly meaningful to you personally about this conference and this time that we've spent together? So let's just share a couple of, what's something about your spirit, something from your heart, something in your soul, something related to your calling that this conference has reignited or nurtured or given you pause for reflection. How does it change you from your core?
Just renewed friendship is energizing.
Let's hear several just sort of popcorn responses here.
It's so easy to become complacent when we have so many other things to deal with. So this has recharged me to rethink the way we're doing some things.
Broadening a vision through shared experience.
You get weary of the work sometimes, and just nice to see other people do it, just encouragement. Just a general uplifting spirit. You guys are awesome.
Well, I know, because we have 3 church music faculty members, we sometimes forget that, and many of you teach in places where you are the church music department, and I think it's good for us to mingle with one another and know that we're not alone. out there, that there are others in the same situation we're in.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sometimes you think you can do it by yourself. It's been good. I appreciate I think Randall said this at the beginning, he said this is a safe environment. I appreciate you inviting us and making us feel so welcome.
I like the collective wisdom that is here. That I can pick your brains and ask, how did you deal with this issue, and learn from it.
It's encouraging that people are thinking the same thoughts.
I think in general, just the passion that I see amongst the people here that drives them in not just the daily efforts, but also in the determination to fulfill the call that God has on their life and to bring that call to the students. That's very exciting to me, to look around this room and see the number of people that have that passion.
Just thinking back on our previous meeting, I think there's a distinct change of tone. Before, we were all in kind of this, what are we going to do? You know, where's this going? What are we going to do? And here, this weekend, there's hope, there's energy, momentum, excitement, vision. So I celebrate that this weekend. Yeah.
Well, I've enjoyed Emily and Jonathan and Eric watching as they're embarking on their new careers, and they're phenomenal people.
I enjoyed our worship experiences.
It's also interesting to note that over the past several years, there has come to be greater acknowledgement for the discipline, which reveals itself in the fact that NASM is about to make this rather remarkable vote, and that can't be diminished in its impact that it will have across the discipline, and especially within the context of what we do. It's been recognized in quite a significant way. So that brings a different level of potentiality to what it is we do here.
And I think the types of collaborations, the issues that we face as a discipline are ones that our music schools are also facing, and so I think we have a unique opportunity. It hits a little closer to home, and we've gone through the changes maybe in the front compared to other disciplines. But I think some of the solutions that we find are going to not only inform our own discipline. I think that if we go about this thoughtfully and well, and I don't just mean within Christian schools. I think schools of music across the country, if not the world, will have, the solutions that we come up with, I think, are ones that can be helpful.
May I ask, even though this has been primarily about undergrad stuff, are there, at the grad level, let's say an ATA, are there standards or discussions about what worship, MDiv or MTS, and is that happening or has it happened? I mean, I don't know the ATA, but I'm assuming that it's part of, certainly everyone's at the center.
I'm sure that that discussion is going on very much in terms of church music and in terms of worship studies and that kind of thing, but it's a discussion that needs to happen, I would say, for sure.
I know that ATS, which is the accrediting agency for many seminaries, and certainly others who are teaching may know about this, but they're in the process right now of significantly re-exploring the future of seminary curriculum, namely that it takes so long and costs so much for ministers to make it out of school and not make a very large salary. Fuller has done a large project that was headed up by Andy Crouch, and they've got a website, and I forget what the website is, I'd have to look it up. But their website has a lot of videos and documentation and ongoing discussions and papers related to the future of the seminary education. I think something that needs to be open to folks like us is how do we then come behind what ATS might do and figure out where music and worship fit in all that in graduate programs, specifically in the seminaries. NASM will be another story, but
or try to get a voice at the table on the front end. Yeah. Other takeaways, without going too much into other subjects, but other takeaways or particular ways in this event this time together has impacted you personally. I think one thing it does for me is a lot of days when I'm quite discouraged about the work that I'm a part of, I try to imagine others of you doing similar things in other places.
And being discouraged.
And I believe that if I can imagine that I'm not the only one chipping away, I can imagine, as our movie said the other night, that I just chip away everything that doesn't look like whatever with the chainsaw artist. And if we're then continuing, if you make a chip and I make a chip and we make a chip, then over time, it really may start to look like what it is we want it to look like, rather than just a block of wood, which looks like something that couldn't be penetrated. So I imagine that oftentimes, and I'll imagine Rob up in Arkadelphia, and Bolivar and Abilene and all these places, and we're all doing a little bit, And if you have some students and we have some students and your students are engaging in ours, then the world will change. Over time, the whole world will change. And I find great hope in that. And so your faces mean a lot to me in that way.
So Randall, even if we're discouraged, we shouldn't just shoot it in the back.
Well, you might say it depends on what it is.
Give me the armadillo gun.
Maybe that's when we should all be pilots, so we wouldn't have to use the freezer as the moves.
Stamping out ignorance is hard work. One kick at a time.